actually started this piece as a small drawing. So traditionally, I would go straight to my canvas and just try to figure it all out on the canvas and sometimes get really frustrated. So this time around, I was feeling kind of nervous to start painting again. I wasn't really feeling it, and I wanted to start small so I could have a sense of accomplishment and kind of study the idea that I was having percolate and form in my mind. So I started with these small little, they're just little index size cards. So I have one in the video in the bottom corner too, so you can see the size. So compared to my hand, so they're about the size of my hand or less. And I decided to do these drawings of these women that I've been finding that are they're in our national archives in the US, and yet they are not, they're labeled by the employment that they're all starting to work. So all these women were taxi drivers in the 40s, but none of them were given their names. And something about that really triggered me. So I decided I wanted to paint these women. So I started with this drawing, and I did a whole bunch of them, in fact, because I wasn't quite sure which piece I wanted to do. And so I have maybe 5 or 6 of them. And after I did these drawings, this one woman kept calling to me. I felt compelled to do her portrait. So after having drawn her once, I could then return to her image, and I kind of knew placement of features and things like that. So I jumped in and I sketched her out, and this is the first incarnation of the painting. So I sketched it out in pencil, and then I painted with, I think this is burnt umber instead of raw umber. I think I ran out of my raw umber. So I just sketched it out really quickly and loosely with a brush, a pretty large size brush. And I just tried to note where I saw the really dark darks and any other kind of shadows. And I like to paint the background in dark and then add color on top if I want to later. And so this is just to help me to place the figure on the canvas, decide if I like the composition, and also help me start to see where the lights and darks fall on the figure. But I don't add this paint until I'm confident that my drawing is near accurate. If there's something little bit that I'm worried about figuring out, then I might wait and tweak it in the painting. But for the most part, I try to make sure that anything I've drawn that's detailed, like making sure the eyes are lined up or that my features are in the right place for a face, I make sure that that's all drawn accurately before I continue. Once I've done that, let's go. And I've added the darks, I actually sometimes go back in and emphasize my lights. So I saw that some of my darks were a little wide and a little too big, and I wanted to really note where I saw some really bright areas and highlights in the portrait. So I went back in with just some white acrylic, and this is all acrylic paint, to note where I saw some of the lights coming through. So that is this layer. Once I did that, I decided it was time for skin tone. So I decided to look at the middle tone, and I basically used scumbling, which is a technique used by impressionists. It's it's a pretty dry brush that you kind of rub into the surface over and over again so that it would let me still see some of the darks that I had layered, and I wanted to make sure that the white still was visible and kind of showing through where she had highlights on her skin. My image reference is actually black and white, so I decided to make up my own kind of imagined vision of what this figure looked like. Again, she had no name, so I also have decided to name her. So once I had kind of those middle tones done, then I went back in and started to really try to finish out and refine the skin tone once I knew what my color combination was, really focusing on not trying to cover everything that I'd already marked, but letting some of those colors show through while refining and kind of creating middle tones that help create transitions in the skin tone. And then I think I had gone back to the hair here at this point, and I've filled in the jacket and the shirt with some blue, and I used all the same colors. So whatever colors I used to make her skin, it's those same colors that I used in the shirt and the blouse and the jacket and her hair. So there's a lot of unity going on here. After that, now we're getting into detail. So you can see here I've started to refine the hair a bit more. Her features are starting to be a little more refined, and it'll take a little time of back and forth at this point to see some of the big changes happening. But I colored in the background. I decided what color I wanted to be. So here I'm starting to really be finished with most of the painting. And so the next step is actually to, oops, that's the wrong way. Flip her upside down. I really like to look at my work upside down and have my image reference upside down so I can make sure that all of my lights and darks are in the right spot, that I think that all of the things are really accurately placed the way I want to. And it can just help me see different shapes because I see the different value steps as different shapes on her figure. And so it's important to help me do that. And if you're looking really carefully here, I actually have some drawn bits on the blouse too, because this piece is not done. I'm going to be adding gold leaf and embroidery to the work. So that's some plotting going on there, but I'm not going to tell you about that. You'll have to see it as it happens because this is more about painting process. So here I've changed her eye color because I thought she had blue eyes, and I kind of touched up the hair a bit more. I painted a highlight in the cap of the hat, and kind of touched up some of her features just a wee bit. I felt like some of her eye stuff wasn't lined up really well, so I tweaked that a little bit and added some highlights around the mouth a bit. So that is how she is right now, pretty much. I'm looking at her around the corner. So that's my process for the painting part, and I'll be removing it from its frame to embroider into it, and then framing it back up again, and then putting on the gold leaf last. I'm not sure about some of the placement of these things, so I will actually be playing with them in Photoshop first to just get a visual idea of kind of what colors I want to use for the embroidery and how it will look in relationship to what I plan to do with the gold leaf. So that covers the making of Ruth, at least what she's had in progress so far.